I've always been driven by the belief that business is the most powerful vehicle of change we have at our disposal. And businesses in just about every sector are attracting customers because they successfully balance purpose and profit. Because they, like me, believe the world needs to transition to a kinder economy. And in a market where customers are making more informed decisions about how and where they spend their money, now more than ever, businesses must reevaluate what their license to operate really is. I'm Nick Hunter, CEO and founder of B-Corp creative agency Paper Moose. And for years, I've been obsessed with navigating that perfect balance between purpose and profit. We call it the mucky middle. Welcome to my podcast, where I chat with successful business leaders about how they navigate the challenges that come with finding their own balance, and hopefully learn how to be a better and more conscious business owner along the way. In today's episode, I talk to my good friend Phil Benedictus, CEO and co-founder of fellow B-Corp Benedictus Media, and co-founder of Net Zero Media, about his journey from academia to becoming a rave DJ to discovering his love of media and being at the forefront of ethics in the landscape. This is The Mucky Middle. Tell me a little bit about young Phil. What did you want to be when you grew up?
Young Phil would have been very surprised that I was CEO of anything, let alone a media agency. I was kind of a pretty square kid, very academic, really into my languages and literature and stuff, and studied hard and ended up at Oxford studying French and Russian. It was only when I got there that I realised that maybe I'd been jumping through hoops, I guess more at my parents' behest than because I was necessarily an out-and-out academic. My dad died just before I got to university, so I think my perspective had changed quite dramatically. Yeah, I discovered DJing while I was at university, and basically I got a third-class degree, but I came out a professional rave DJ with my first record contract.
Amazing. So I love having these conversations with people, particularly people I know, like yourself, because there's so many stories that I had no idea that you were quite an academic kid.
Yeah, I was always freakily good at languages. But like I say, I was kind of good at it without really being that interested. It turned out when you actually get to somewhere like Oxford where they're going to, go in depth into things, I kind of wasn't that interested in the depths.
Just a shallow level of deep language.
Can I just learn to speak French and Russian, please?
Yeah. No. We're going to go right back to the origins.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right. And okay, so then you became a rave DJ. Tell me a little bit about that.
It was entirely accidental. I had a big record collection, and I'd become mates with this guy at university who was best mates with quite a big name DJ in London. And I was also matey with another guy who had inns at a club, and one of them, this mate Mackie, he wanted to start DJing at a club and suggested I come and join him because I had a big record collection. Yeah, I had this other friend, Ed, who had an inn to a club called the Caribbean Club, which was the most underground club in Oxford. But somehow we booked this club and started running a night there, which became quite big. And both me and Mackie, my DJ partner, were linguists and had a year abroad in France. And that's where, in about 1990-91, things really took off.
In France?
In France, yeah.
Yep.
It all started getting a bit serious. By the end of that year, I was DJing to 1,000 people every Saturday night, and I presented a French cable TV program called 120 BPM, or 120 BPM, where I would interview touring dance music stars who came to Paris.
And how do you jump from a DJ into media, running your own media agency?
I mean, it's not obvious, is it? But although I say that, there are so many ex-DJs in media, it turns out.
Really?
So it's obviously not that out there. I mean, in my case, I wrote a how to DJ course for a company called Point Blank, who've gone on to be quite a big deal. And that took a lot of PR and marketing too. And that was when I first realised I was actually quite interested in just the getting the marketing out. But then, yeah, in another pretty random twist. So I'm half Aussie, half English. I'm, as you can hear, not particularly good at the Aussie bit. In about, I think it was 2001, my grandfather died in Brisbane. And I'd been given an offer to write the book of the How to DJ course. And it had always been my ambition, sorry, harking back to your first question, which I clearly didn't answer properly. It's always been my ambition to make records and write books as a young unrealistic person. And I had by this stage made records, and here was someone offering me to write a book. So I was like, bloody brilliant.
Tick. What do you do now?
And I'm only 30. Yeah. So I went to look after my grandma in Brisbane, and grandma's house in Brisbane being the perfect quiet spot to write a book. I was terribly disappointed with the final result. The first version was pretty good, but they wanted me to edit it, and then some editor who I don't think really understood musical terms had a final edit, and I'm now quite embarrassed by it.
Interesting.
Suffice it to say, I wanted to call it Everything You Ever Wanted to Know About DJing But Were Too High to Ask. They called it DJing, A Beginner's Guide to Success on the Decks. And it had all the charm that implies.
Have you ever thought about re-releasing it now?
No. If I was rich enough, I'd probably try and buy all copies and burn them.
There you go. We'll just make an audiobook version of it. Pop it up on Audible. So with that kind of, I guess, the shards of a broken dream kind of there, is that what happened?
Well, no, I mean, when I came to Australia also, I was at a point where, age 30, I was a bit over being in nightclubs 2-3 nights a week.
Yeah.
And also, I was sound engineering through the week, which again tends to be really, back then in London, seemed to always be antisocial hours. And I was just over that sort of lifestyle angle of it. I am a bit of a night owl, but this was sort of taking it to extremes. And by in your early 20s, it's all right. All your mates still want to come to your clubs and are quite up for keeping stupid hours. By your time you're 30, you're out on your own. You're
still doing that, Phil?
Yeah, exactly. So when I came to Australia anyway, I was kind of looking for certainly to take a break. Yeah, no, when I'd finished writing the book and I came down to Sydney, fell into a sales job because I didn't really know what to do. My first job in Sydney was basically selling phone contracts to businesses whereby you got free office equipment with your phone contract.
Right.
As you can probably hear from my voice, I don't know if I ever really believed in the product offering.
Deeply passionate. Yeah. Very purpose-driven.
I was rubbish. And I did that. I said I'd keep doing it until I hated it, until I could solve the Sydney Morning Herald cryptic crossword on my way to work. One day I did it and I slapped the copy down on my supervisor's desk and quit. And somehow, through a friend who I then started my first agency with, I then found myself in a commissions-only media sales job. And while I was shocked at that it turned out that the world of media and marketing had, I'd say, as much or maybe even more graft involved than the music industry. I mean, not quite. I've had a rave pulled where we were told to stop the music because the promoter was being held at gunpoint. And it was time for us to go.
It's not quite like that in advertising these days.
So not that bad.
Yeah.
But it was still full of cowboys. And the job was brilliant. I mean, I'd found that you'd sell pages in these magazines at full price at the beginning of the month, then soon realised that during the middle of the month, no one would be really interested until the publisher said, okay, you can sell on distress, i.e. at low rates. And then you'd flog the rest of the pages at the end of the month. So after a few months, that meant really a working cycle of I'll work a few days in the first week of the month, then I'll go to the beach, and then the last week of the month I'll sell some more pages. And that lasted for about 2-3 years. I mean, the gig had always been too good to be true. That I have a feeling the company got bought by someone.
Oh, all right.
But yes, no, and yeah, we would have been unmanageable idiots.
Yeah.
I mean, and then I had 6 months working for Peer Group Media, where again I was a not particularly good salesperson. But then this time trying to sell sponsorships to Big Day Out and Good Vibrations and all those great festivals that we sadly don't have anymore, before realising that really wasn't, I wasn't that well suited to it. I think the boss realised that quite a long time before I did. And then ended up starting an agency about 4 months after with Lawrence, the mate who had introduced me to my first media sales job. Who found a client and was convinced that we could do it. And I distinctly remember the first time we got a client and they asked for a media plan, the two of us looking at each other saying, what's a media plan? And having to ring a friend in marketing and being very relieved to find out it was a spreadsheet. With maybe an accompanying document.
And it hasn't evolved that much since then either.
Well, I like to think maybe it has.
Still a spreadsheet.
Still a spreadsheet, yeah. But so when we started off, the whole offering was we're going to buy everything at on distress at the end of the sales cycles by being small and nimble. And that agency was Benedictus Smith, and we tickled along for about 3 years. And then we parted ways. Lawrence, because he wanted to really be more commercial and specialise in high-end in particular, sort of luxury goods and fashion. And I had got the purpose bug from doing a bit of work with Get Up in 2006 and with the International Fund for Animal Welfare. So variously with Get Up, we had this campaign where we managed to get the period of time you have to wait before enrolling to vote after your 18th birthday reduced. So that was a major win. And then even more excitingly, with International Fund for Animal Welfare, we persuaded the Rudd government to take the Japanese to court over whaling in the Southern Ocean, which was amazing. Also an amazing campaign, because this was the early days of Facebook, and it was a genuinely viral campaign. People were invited to make whale tails and take pictures of themselves making whale tails as their profile pic, and they actually did it. And then, yes, the next 5 years were people asking for things to be viral.
Can you make a whale tail for us?
Yeah. Can you make something go viral? Well, not really.
Yeah.
I do think it really has influenced, particularly with Benedictus, it influenced how I set the company up. Like one of the reasons I went off and, did music after university was because the whole idea of joining a big company felt like it would be such a sort of compromise on ethics and lifestyle, let's be honest. And it just felt like it would all be a bit false. So one of the sort of central planks when we founded Benedictus was, this is going to be somewhere that 21-year-old Phil would have been cool with working. Yeah. So that meant, if you want to work from home a bit, I'm pretty cool with that. Make sure you look after the staff properly. Yeah. So already quite a lot of those sort of central, what became, I guess, B-Corp values down the line were imbued. And that and the interest in purpose, which once I discovered that you could, rather than just sell stuff, you could save a whale or two, I was this is for me, yeah.
And I think there's also something like from, not having a huge amount of experience in other media agencies, you were designing from first principles, which I think there's a real advantage to that in sometimes, there's obviously, you'll probably make a few more mistakes along the way as we have, but it's definitely, you create something that's far more unique than copying, carbon copying a different agent.
I mean, our approach now is very different. It's not all about distress. It's very much about a process for buying good media, making sure the client gets noticed in the right place, the right moment, a less carbon-heavy way of buying your media. So
yeah, talk to us about the carbon side of things, because that's fairly, not new. It's you're two and a half years in with Net Zero Media.
Yeah, so the carbon thing, at the beginning of lockdown, we were involved in a pitch. The pitch we were actually unsuccessful for, but as part of the pitch, I told the client I would work out the carbon footprint of media as we went so they could offset it. Then lockdown came about 2 months later, and I started just getting involved in, I wonder what a TV signal looks like in terms of carbon for a 30-second ad. And I very, very, very quickly realised it was way too difficult for me. But I sort of carried on with the ambition, and Damien, my co-director at Benedictus, and I set up, we bought the name Net Zero Media and the website because we had an ambition to, come up with an offering to calculate carbon accurately. Albeit at that stage we hadn't, this is a repetitive trope, there's no idea how we were going to do it.
But you figured it out.
Well, to be honest, where we were really lucky was we won the Comms Declare, what was it called? The Comms Declare Climate Champion Award, I think they called it that year. And at the awards ceremony, one of the judges, Darren Woolley from Trinity P3, I got talking to him about my ambitions with carbon. He said, you need to make my mate Chris Sewell. He's been doing that since 2007. And so, sure enough, we met up with Chris and put Net Zero together to try and take that idea to a greater scale. It was clearly something that obviously I wanted to use for Benedictus Media, but that would be pretty limited impact. Benedictus is a boutique agency, and I think the ad market globally is $1 trillion or something silly.
That's a lot of carbon.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are the effects of, because we've looked at doing the same for advertising, but our impacts are quite small really, because we we run off renewables, we can limit our impact on sets and shoots and all that kind of thing. But obviously buying media is quite different.
Yeah, look, buying media, it uses a lot of energy. Just like someone like Combank, we did some numbers based off their own released figures of advertising spend and their overall carbon footprint, and we reckoned that for them, advertising could be as much as 40% of their overall carbon footprint.
Wow.
Yeah.
That sounds crazy.
It sounds crazy, but if you think about it, they, like Paper Moose, have got mostly a lot of venues or offices where they can control electricity supply, and they're quite a good actor in that sort of world. And they spend, a healthy 9 figures a year on advertising and marketing. And when you think that in Australia, a single Facebook ad impression, like just for a static ad or a normal display ad, is going to come in at around 1.2 grams of carbon. And a 10 million impression campaign for Facebook is pretty tiny. You can see just how that medium it starts adding up.
Yeah. So are you calculating it like the television that I'm watching the ad on, or how do you calculate it?
We look at the energy generation. So for a start, are you in a state? For the case of Australia, there are some states that have green energy generation, some that have dirtier generation. So New South Wales and Victoria, we're pretty heavily coal-based. It's pretty mucky, as opposed to, say, Tasmania, where it's nearly all renewables. So you start off with what's the generation base, because that's going to give you kind of the multiplier for electrical units being used. Then you look at how much energy to upload the material to wherever it needs to be consumed. So in the case of a billboard, that's literally putting it up on a billboard. In the case of a digital file, that's probably uploading it to a publisher, and a publisher then uploading it to a content distribution network. Various different weight formats of that ad being made, if it's video, by the content distribution network. And then you look at the consumption of that by the consumer. And for that, yes, we will usually use assumptions based on data of how many people watch that particular medium on what kind of device.
Yeah, interesting.
To then work out the power ratings, for instance.
So it's mainly tracked back to energy usage.
Typically for most media. I mean, like I say, for outdoor, no, because you've got to look at the skin, what the skin of the poster was made of. Is it going to be recycled or not?
And it's a lot of digital out of home now as well.
And there's, the digital out of home. And traditional out of home, there's a van that turns up and puts up the poster, there's just straight up petrol usage and stuff. Or similarly, mobile billboards, it's petrol you're looking at, really, not electricity. And what we try and look at it as what would be the advertiser's Scope 3 emissions. So that is to say, everything, as I say, from the upload of the ad to the final consumption of that ad.
And let's just go back a little bit to Benedictus and you were one of the early B Corps in Australia, weren't you?
We weren't absolutely first wave. We've been a B Corp since 2016. We were very early for the media industry.
Yeah.
We think we may be the first media agency in the world that got B Corp certification. And certainly when we did first get it, no one knew what it meant or seemed to really care.
I mean, most people still don't, but they're getting there.
I mean, it goes back to that International Fund for Animal Welfare campaign when I worked with Ben Peacock, who went on to set up Republic of Everyone and who's been obviously really pioneering in the whole B Corp purpose-related space in Australia. Yeah, he did a B Corp coffee morning one day, and it was like someone was describing back to me how we tried to operate. It's like, yes, we use green energy. Yes, we try to be terribly nice to our employees. No, we won't work with advertisers that are, polluters or bad supply chains or labour. Yeah, exactly. And I was delighted because, we worked and work with a lot of for-purpose charities and places. And in the initial term, I just wanted to show them that we cared as much as they do. Because you occasionally got a bit of shade from, people working in charities who thought you at an agency, you're somehow unworthy, whilst forgetting that they're probably getting paid too.
Particularly media agencies. Media agencies get a bad rap.
Yeah, I think, well, look, and they get a bad rap because lots of them deserve it, let's be honest. I mean, there's so much malpractice in that area. So many agencies are making loads of money still off programmatic inventory that frankly does bugger all to sell anything. I do think there is a genuine need for a good media agency.
Yeah,
good,
agreed.
And I think good, as I say, it has to be effectiveness first. But if you do effectiveness right, and maybe do a bit of measuring of carbon along the way. You can also do it in a way that means that you can discreetly be minding your footprint as well.
Yeah, because you're very transparent in the way that you approach everything.
Yes, well, that was one of our first differentiators when we set up Benedictus in 2007. There are going to be no markups on anything. We don't take anything at the back end.
No backhanded deals.
No backhanded deals. We will charge the fees that we think we deserve. And it does mean we look expensive sometimes. You have multinational groups who will pitch for a large company's business and say, I will just do it for 1% of your spend from the media rebate. But they can afford to do that because they're taking another 15 off the bottom. So, yeah, look, it means that we have to have really strong client relationships where people understand that they're paying for quality, but they're also paying for value because, we're not skimming.
Yeah, interesting. In building a business like this, you started it when you were still quite young and hadn't been across that many businesses. I mean, no, you didn't go to business school or anything like that. You also taught yourself all of that sort of thing. It
was a pretty interesting journey. It turned out that I don't know. It's a really difficult one to, for years I felt I had classic imposter syndrome, and for good reason. Even when it was Benedictus Smith, and really our point of difference was what we sell you is going to be cheaper. We were always bringing some kind of advantage to the table.
Yeah.
But the truth is, running up until you're running an agency of 4 or 5 people, it's really not that complicated. Luckily for me, we just quite organically developed. The first 3-4 years, the first couple of years, there was 2 of us, me and Lawrence. Then first year of Benedictus, there was me plus 1. Then we got a 3rd employee. So it kind of scaled very gently in a way that made that easy to handle. What I found was when it got up to about 10, 12 people was when I had to import some actual management experience from people who knew A, how to run a business, B, getting a proper CFO who could manage cash flow better than me.
There's very distinct gear shifts, I think, in businesses like that. I think it was like the 12, 13 for us, and then almost like the 18, 20, and then just around the 30, there's been like another gear shift. It's like,
yeah, right.
It just changes the complexity of what you're designing for and I guess how you manage all of your HR systems and building a culture that is consistent all the way through, and your hiring practices. It's very easy to hire the right people, I find, when it's 10 people, but when you have a business of 30 people and have a certain amount of attrition, it's interesting to sort of keep that consistency.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. I mean, we've never, I think the biggest we've ever been is 18, and then the last few years, sort of through COVID and just coming out the back of that, we'd sort of quite purposefully just kept things around 12, although we're sort of gearing up for more growth now. I mean, yeah, look, I think in many ways I'm a typical entrepreneur in that I'm good at seeing opportunities and possibilities, and I'm probably not a very accurate assessor of risk. I think things are going to be doable.
You've got to be an optimist.
Well, yeah, which is odd because I'm not sure I really am in other ways. So yeah, I lean really heavily. I've got this fantastic COO, CFO, Damien Thompson, who is just a legend, and he is all over process and he's all over accounting. He's a trained accountant, and he also happens to be someone who's done a fair bit of dev work, so is really helpful on IT. And it's a bit like an artist who needs a manager.
Josh and I very much have the same relationship.
Yeah, and I've always made an effort since we got to that, especially since we got past that sort of 5-6 people size, to surround myself with people who have got those sort of, I guess, more business/process oriented skills.
Yeah, it's good to surround yourself with people much better than yourself.
Yeah, generally try and hire more talented people.
I'm quite happy to be the stupidest person in the room.
Yeah, me too. I think I set a relatively low bar.
What do you reckon has been the biggest challenge so far in terms of building Benedictus in particular?
The biggest challenges I've had would be, when things go badly wrong. So there was an awful cyber fraud in 2018, 2019, a large 6-figure cyber fraud, which we squeaked our way through. I had to not take a wage for a year and borrow quite a lot of money, and we had to shed staff. That was really very stressful.
Yeah, that sounds right.
I have in the past. I've set up another agency with business partners where I learnt that you need to be very careful of how you set things up. Well, of certain business partners, make sure you've got everything in writing.
How do you think you should find a business partner? It often happens quite organically. Like, I mean, Josh and I went to high school together.
Yeah.
And you know, the cardinal rule is always to not set up a business with a friend, but it's hard to know how to trust someone, and because you also don't know the journey of a business and where it's going to evolve to, and where you personally are going to evolve.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I can't believe there is a sort of cookie cutter method of choosing a business partner. Like I say, for me, getting Damien on board, and he came in originally, you know, part time and has taken up a bigger and bigger role. So that's a nice sort of organic development of that kind of partnership arrangement. But I think also there are moments in the growth of an agency where, you know, you might want to bring someone else onto the leadership team who's had, I don't know, more big agency experience or experience of larger budgets or whatever it might, or forming bigger teams, you know. Where you're going to have to do it a bit more strategically. Yeah,
I've struggled. It's interesting trying to get people from like non-independent agencies, like particularly because we've built everything from first principles, so some of our practices are maybe a little unusual. And I think a lot of people coming in will be like, oh no, I'm used to doing it this particular way, or why don't you, you know? And we like to steal and, you know, borrow from the big agencies, but not replicate in the same way.
I hear you on that. I think not. Like big agency culture is a very different thing, those network agencies. And again, it's by no means a hard and fast rule, but you're right, a lot of people from that culture seem to struggle in indie culture.
Yeah, where's my 12 people to help me do this one task? It's like, I'm sorry, that is your job.
You actually have to do that.
You're going to have to do the work too,
So look, there is a different culture. I mean, I can't speak to it that much just because I've never worked in a big agency.
No, me neither.
And I always, you know, we've always been painfully independent, and it's only probably the last few years I've really started turning up to more networking events and trying to get to know more of the industry. My networks were always much more in not-for-profit and sort of progressive political directions, the B-Corp world. So I kind of had and I think that's probably one of our advantages in building the business, is we were fishing in probably different ponds to a lot of agencies.
Yeah, and you are markedly different from a brand and, you know, what you stand for. Like, as you said, you know, you were one of the first media agencies to become a B Corp, and that's, you know, quite unusual. How important do you think positioning and brand building is for agencies?
I think it's very important, and I think it's something that, I mean, it's something that I've done, typically like the cobbler with holes in his shoes, I've done a not great job on. Partly I blame myself for calling the agency Benedictus, because that made me immediately self-conscious. I mean, that's actually something that we're trying to address at the moment. So I have finally, after 16 years, you know, in talking to a PR agency to a point, looking to try and, just try and shout a bit more about our good media offering. You know, there is a good way of doing media. We do it that way. We've been.
You can be ethical.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, the good way is always going to be ethical, I think. And you know, and this is why the ethics are important, because I mean, in the end of the day, it comes down to you're doing this for the client, not for yourself. I mean, obviously you are, because you're getting income. Yeah. But if
there should be a shared, an exchange of
that's right.
Of values.
That's right. I mean, if you're not optimizing for the client's end result, then you're not going to last for very long, or you shouldn't if competition is working properly. Yeah,
that's right. What do you think is kind of the future of like big holdcos and that kind of thing? Because
I have absolutely no idea.
You run your own race. You don't care.
Look, I mean, there seems to be. I mean, again, as I say, I can't overstate how little I know about the big holdcos. But from the outside, I've been very interested how the last couple of years, a lot of the holdcos have started at least making noises about carbon measurement and so on. Yeah,
I guess you want them to be your clients in some ways with the net zero.
Well, I'd hope so, although, to be honest, they're all coming up with their own calculators, and no one's agreeing on. One of the biggest problems with measuring carbon is there is no standardised that everyone has agreed on.
Is that something that has to come from like federal legislation?
Typically it would be the industry. It's in the same way as the industry came to agree on measurement of, say, TV metrics based on, in my view, the not very good set-top box system.
Yeah.
But it's an agreed metric, or ditto the IAB when they'll appoint someone to say this is who's measuring how many people come to certain websites, this kind of thing. That said, I mean, I think it takes the advertising industry a long time to come to those agreements. I mean, you've got early movers who are going to want the advantage of being an early mover. You know, I mean, to an extent, I'm like that with Benedictus, albeit we try via net zero to share our green knowledge.
That's part of being like a thought leader in the space as well.
But that's right. So, you know, you find that Group M at the moment, they've got a calculator that was being developed out of Essence in London. I think, look, in the last 2 years, the conversation's changed a lot because people's faith in carbon offsets as a thing is plummeted, and largely for good reason because, I mean, number one, the whole idea of an offset is an accounting bloody idea. And it's not really the same. Like, an offset really means you're sequestering some carbon, like I'm growing a tree, so that a tree's worth of carbon's going to be in a tree. Well, that's only out of the system for as long as the tree is alive, doesn't rot, and put the carbon back in the system. You're not taking the carbon out for good.
We need to be actually measuring it and then reducing it, and
exactly. So
offsetting is kind of the first step, I suppose.
I think the problem is the word offset. It's not an offset. It's not an exact.
It's not a direct offset.
It's not a zero-sum game. It's taking.
It's a bit misleading in terms.
I mean, I think you want to reduce as much as you can, and then yes, if you can take some action that's going to mitigate climate impact, and you express it in that kind of language, I think that's a good thing. But you have to be clear. You know, you're doing something good that probably is going to be good on the carbon measuring scale, at least in the immediate term, and some solutions may be much longer term than my tree example. But it is still that. It's mitigation. It's not an offset.
What do you think about this? I mean, there's a lot of backlash around greenwashing, which is, you know, quite rightly so. But do you think there is a potential that clients will actually step back from trying to do good and talking about the good that they're doing?
I think unfortunately that's very much the case. I think it's become a really hairy area because people are so alert, especially with the whole carbon credit thing, to actual greenwashing. And I think egregious examples of it, and this is personally just a personal view, there was an Appia campaign recently talking about, you know, clean gas. Wow. I mean, which just to me, like, just saying clean gas is already a lie.
That's a big problem.
It's actually gas industry is one of my favourite examples of really shit carbon credits. You know, you can be mining gas and sequestering the carbon as you do it, get given credits for that sequestration of carbon.
Oh my God.
And then you can sell those credits to someone else.
Oh my God.
So this is how we end up with nonsenses like Ample claiming to have had a carbon neutral petrol and stuff like this.
It's interesting because we've had this kind of good momentum of brands wanting to do better for the planet and talking about it to create more momentum, and now I sense a little bit of fear around talking about these things, which might potentially slow down that progression. Well, I hope it doesn't. But
I think that's right. I think there is a genuine fear of, you know, like, legal departments in any client you want to talk about this stuff, they're going to suddenly get pretty twitchy. Globally, somehow it's got politicized. Somehow, I really don't follow the logic of this. You know, you have, broadly speaking, it seems like, and I'm sure listeners will be able to point out faults in this argument as well. Broadly speaking, it seems like the further right a political party is, the less they give a monkeys about climate change. So in the UK, for instance, Rishi Sunak just has granted 100 new North Sea oil exploration licenses during a summer where everyone in Britain's going, ooh, Europe's on fire. And there are going to come these crunch points. It's like actually dealing with climate change is going to, I mean, it involves actual change, behavioural change.
And it does have to cost something.
Something that I personally believe is that we as individuals have managed to somehow be persuaded that a lot of climate change is our fault on a sort of micro level.
That blame game of particular generations.
It's like, if you look at where the carbon comes from globally, I can't remember the figures, but, you know, there's a big chunk that's just from making fossil fuels and burning them. There's a big chunk from iron and smelting of other metals. But the truth is, like 70-80% of the whole lot is big business and big industry. And we at the consumer end are just, you know, like in New South Wales, if I want to get electricity and I don't have solar panels, it's going to be dirty electricity. Even if I buy green electricity, really that just means it's getting offset. Oh, I've used that word again.
Not directly offset, but
yes, really that means that there is some carbon mitigation taking place.
That's good. I mean, the topic is, the mucky middle, so.
Yeah, well, we go. We've established a particularly mucky bit there.
Yeah.
So, I think there was a client of mine who expressed it nicely. He always talks about microbollocks. It's like, we've all been told to worry about the microbollocks. Have you recycled everything?
The things that really don't amount to much.
I believe there was a study in Norway where it was claimed, I'm going to use my best legalistic language, it was claimed that changing your super to an ethical investment company made 27 times the difference of all the microbollocks you could do in and around your home and your personal life. And I think that's one of the really difficult things which people grapple with carbon, is like just getting a sense of proportion. How important is turning off my light bulb as opposed to eating steak, as opposed to driving a four-wheel drive? So yeah, exactly. Like there's so little.
Drinking with a plastic straw versus
exactly.
It's highly complicated, and I think it also feels like you're doing something at the it's actionable. You feel every day I go to the coffee shop with my Keep cup, I feel like I'm doing something good,
and you are,
and I am. Yeah. But on the scheme of things, there are much larger things that I could do, like reducing the amount of beef I eat. That's far more significant than.
Annoyingly, on a personal level, the vegetarian thing really does work.
It is irritating, but
as someone brought up on meat. But yes, I think that's kind of one of the great, one of the sort of great bits of bullshit of our time, really, is being sold that this is you, the population. It's not.
It's big business. I mean, that's why we feel that businesses are the best vehicle of change that we have at our disposal, which is why we want to partner with organisations that are helping to move to decarbonisation or to a better place, and being part of the B-Corp movement's a great sort of part of that.
Benedictus Media would 100% agree, and that's exactly how we would work too. Is we see how slowly things move through politics, and God knows, we as a company we've worked with all sorts of progressive political movements, particularly around green issues. And yes, you do end up thinking that something like a green investment house is probably more directly making change than a lot of those efforts.
Yeah, agree. What about sacrifices? I mean, I think being purpose driven, often you have to make difficult decisions on, like, has there been a very lucrative client that's come along that you've had to go, no?
I mean, look, for us it hasn't come up a lot because we've just never tried to pitch for really big stuff. There have been, I guess, in terms of, does it stop us from growing as fast as if we're a rapacious, we'll advertise anything company? Yes, it certainly does. Am I comfortable with that? Yes, 100%. I wouldn't want to grow, faster than we can organically. Personally, no, actually, I don't feel it's any kind of sacrifice. In fact, it's more I'd just be hideously uncomfortable if it was the other way around. Yeah.
And what about bringing people on into Benedictus? So
yes.
You're a B-Corp. How much does that, do you find that a very effective way of bringing people, in terms of recruitment?
I think it's definitely a plus in terms of recruitment. People can see, and especially again in media agencies, a lot of places people are trading without knowing the actual price maybe of what they're offering the client, this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
My guys know that everything is 100% transparent. They do get quite nicely looked after as well. There's like massages on a Wednesday morning, there's yoga on a Friday. There's quite a lot of working from home going on, which I know isn't anything different to anyone else. But yeah, it definitely makes a difference. People don't want to feel burdened by a conscience because it turns out that pushing some betting brand to gambling addicts or worse.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. The gambling thing is super interesting. We've had a few offers to work on that, and it's been a flat no.
Yeah.
One was an ethical gambling company, which I thought was...
Oh, that's an interesting one.
Yeah,
how did they...
They reached out because we're a B-Corp, and I was like, we're an ethical gambling company. We'd really like to work. And I was like, what is that? How does that even work? What is...
That's fantastic. That's in the same box as Ampol's
100%.
Carbon-free petrol.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think they gave, a certain amount of their profits somewhere or something like that. But it's like... Okay, but you're intrinsically evil and doing terrible things to the people that can't afford to have that done to them.
But that question of who you will and work with is always interesting. Like there are...
Yeah, what is the line in the sand?
Exactly.
And it is grey. It is like, we work with some massive organisations that aren't what you would necessarily think of as purpose-driven, but they are moving towards a better world, and they're not intrinsically evil. So that, I think it's about having an honest conversation, and I think, also bringing on people that, we're a B Corp, we do all these things, but understand that we have a nuanced understanding of business, and we want to be helping businesses transition to a, kinder economy, and that requires a transition sometimes, and we can help accelerate that faster.
With that in mind, we've always worked more on sort of negative definition of saying, well, look, there are just certain things we couldn't do, so we couldn't sell fossil fuels as such.
Yeah.
But to your point, and I can't imagine how media would do this, we could help a fossil fuel company transition into being a non-fossil fuel company, then, I mean, it's not...
Well, there's that big discussion at the moment in I think, Europe, of the B Corps that are pitching on the Shell account.
Oh, yeah, right.
And there's a big discussion around whether they should keep their B Corp status if they end up working on the account, which is an interesting... it's an interesting debate.
It is an interesting one. I guess for you guys in a creative agency, there's a lot more you can do to help people in a transition phase.
I'd like to think so.
Like in the end of the day, we'd be just buying media for your work again.
Yeah, that's true. As long as the work is good.
But there are points like I've always wondered if one of the B Corp brewers wanted to work with us, where would we stand on that? I tend to think I'd be all right with. But then, there are other B Corps who would look at me and say, "Don't be stupid, you can't sell beer."
Yeah, I said this at the Umbrella Finance Conference. I said, we'll never work with fossil fuel companies, gambling, and fast finance, but we will work with alcohol. Yeah. And someone kind of, said, well, that's a bit odd that you can work with booze, which has obviously, has negative effects on culture, but also has very positive effects. So it is a very grey.
Yes, I think that's one super grey. I mean,
yeah, it's a grey one. Whereas a pokey machine, that for me is, there's no grey area on pokies.
That is just bad.
Evil. Yeah, exactly. Like there's no defensible position for that. Whereas at least booze, I'd feel like a little bit of a hypocrite because I drink alcohol, and
that's precisely my position too. I drink alcohol, but I would also, I think it's the sort of thing I would, like, probably as a B Corp we would look at a staff vote on that kind of issue if I really couldn't pull it apart.
Yeah, we do the same. If there's anything a little bit grey, then we'll go, look, this is the reasons that we think we should be working with this business, but this is an open forum, if anyone has an issue with this, please bring it up now, and we'll sometimes vote on some of these things just to get alignment and make sure that everyone is comfortable. Because I also don't want someone to have to work for 6 months on a campaign that they're actually dying inside and hating the business for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the brewers are a particularly interesting one because you have brewers like Young Henry's is a great example. They're doing the brewing itself I think they've got carbon-free, is it carbon-negative brewing or something?
Well, we're about to launch a new business for them around this, but it's a secret.
Oh, okay, sorry.
But yes, I mean, they're doing, currently it's called the Algae Project. Yeah. And essentially they're making sure that the brewing process itself will be carbon, I always get this confused, carbon-negative? Negative.
I read about it a few months ago, and apparently it's a process that may be applicable to other industries. And there's a bit of me is like, well, look, people are going to drink beer, so if they're going to drink it, well, at least let's make it as good as it can be.
Yeah. And I think it's also, what are you doing in terms of your advertising? Are you targeting a particular audience that you shouldn't be? Like problem drinking or problem gamblers and all of that kind of thing. It's like figuring out how you can advertise in an ethical way these products. But, it's obviously hard because you're trying to go to as broad an audience as well.
Yeah, and I do think the alcohol thing is, like, I mean, I'm someone who, as a single male, ends up ordering Uber Eats too much. Now, Uber Eats has noticed that I'll occasionally order a bottle of wine and now keeps pushing that at me. Yeah. Now, that in the at that moment of purchase decision, I'm not that comfortable with that.
Yeah.
Because it's like going, you individual are a drinker. Can you drink some more?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have another one. But if we're creating a brand campaign that, has put something into the back of your head, and you're looking at your alcohol, your BWS liquor shop, whatever, and you're looking at a series of cans in front of you, and you go, oh, I remember that ad. I'm going to choose that one because you were there anyway. Look at me trying to convince myself.
No. I think that's a very fair, ethical sort of fine point. Those are two quite different scenarios. One is you're eating something and we know you'd probably like a drink. And the other is I'm in a bottle shop, I'm about to buy a drink, which one do I buy?
Yeah, one is slightly more nefarious, but it is interesting.
Well, we failed to put that one to bed.
No, that's a discussion for another time. We'll continue talking about that. What about in terms of running a business, work-life balance?
I think growing a small business, you're going to be bloody lucky if you can maintain work-life balance throughout it. And certainly I didn't. Particularly in the early days, I remember that generally I would aim to have worked 45 hours by the end of Wednesday.
Yeah.
Because I'd need to be able to schmooze on Thursdays, Fridays, and there just was a lot of work, and Christ, there were only two of us, and that was how it was. So you'd get in a lot of hours earlier in the week and at your desk, and then out and about probably the other two. And still, look, I always say running your own business, it can be the best thing in the world when it's going well. Maybe you're not having to work too hard, your staff are all doing everything nicely, the clients are happy. And when it goes wrong, someone steals a huge amount of money from you or whatever, it's on you. And you're not going to be able to escape it. Yeah. It doesn't matter if you're not in the office, you're still not escaping it.
There's a certain point where the business owns you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. What advice would you give to other entrepreneurs?
I'd always say, well, just have it. You need that have a go attitude, number one. You probably need to have that attitude balanced by some financial common sense, or in my case, someone who has got some financial common sense.
Yeah.
And right here and now, I'd also say just, so much of our problem as a planet is consumption. Is what you're doing going to make that situation worse? Yeah. How softly can you tread?
Which is a particularly hard thing as advertisers, because we are often driving consumption.
That's exactly right. So, which is why I think you have to be so careful who you work with in the end.
What about to young Phil? What advice would you give to young Phil sitting here now?
I probably would have said, do a sensible job for a bit in your 20s so you can learn from other people how to run a business before you go and faceplant multiple times on your own way. I think that would be the biggest thing. I think, and this was partly because of my dad dying just before university and going through a bit of trauma. I think I probably went too far off the grid initially. Yeah, I sort of dropped out a bit from mainstream working society. So that's probably the thing that I wouldn't have done. And I would say to myself, no, get involved in mainstream working society. And it turns out you can trust yourself to try and create some change, or at least provide some leadership in that space, Do
you think there's something, though, in the fact that you did follow the path that you did? Like, I personally can't imagine starting a business in my 30s if I'd been in an agency all that time. Like the fact that I had nothing at the beginning anyway. There was little to risk. It's interesting when you're younger. Whereas if you have an established career, there's a lot more to risk in some ways.
Yeah, no, that's true. And that was one of the blessings of well, you've been a DJ, you probably don't want to be a full-time DJ anymore. And how many people are going to employ an ex-DJ?
Yeah. I guess I better build my own business.
And there was definitely a lot of that. It's like I just didn't think that I was very employable, and I thought that I would have a better chance of getting somewhere where I could earn a decent wage and do an interesting job if I followed my own path. Because I thought I'd fucked it in terms of, most career prospects. And I probably had.
Yeah.
I still don't think I'd be a great interview candidate for much.
I think you're selling yourself short.
Well, I mean, in terms of doing a job for someone else,
Yeah.
you know.
Oh, yeah. No, I think I'd be a terrible employee.
Yeah, ditto. Yeah.
I guess from that, when you think that you've totally fucked it, actually just start something yourself.
But yeah, there was genuinely in my head. I felt that there probably wasn't that much choice, and I think you're right. Actually, I think I'm going to have to go back on what I said. I think if I had been working in an agency, I probably would have found it very scary setting off to do that on my own.
There's something about being already in the unknown that is something freeing about that as well.
Yeah, and I think I was lucky also that I think coming in media, coming from the sales side, it allowed you to see faults in what was being offered to
things you could poke holes in
clients. I mean, obviously, I didn't realise half how complicated it was going to be.
But again, sometimes ignorance is bliss in sometimes those early phases.
Yeah, no, that's right. I think that's absolutely true.
You'd never do it if you knew how difficult it was going to be in retrospect.
How much risk there was going to be and all of that stuff. It's exactly right.
Awesome, Phil. Well, thank you so much for joining us in Paper Muse HQ in the bunker.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for listening to The Mucky Metal. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed having the conversation. And if you did, then drop us a review on iTunes or wherever you happen to be listening. We'll see you next month for another episode, but in the meantime, we hope you'll keep walking that fine line between profit and our planet.
The Mucky Middle is a Paper Moose production. Music and sound mix by Caleb Jacobs.